Hello and welcome to a special edition of Let's Talk Criterion, where we'll be delving into the new box set release Pasolini 101 from Italian director Pier Paolo Pasolini. Now, to get us to the start of his directorial period in the 1960s, the set actually covers, we first need to go back to his beginnings. Born in Bologna, traditionally one of the most politically leftist of Italy's cities, his family moved to Conegliano in 1923. Pasolini began writing poems at the age of 7, inspired by the natural beauty of Cassarsa. Now, one of his early influences was the work of Arthur Rimbaud. In 1933, they moved again to Cremona in Lombardy, and later to Scandiano and Reggio Emilia. Now, Pasolini found it difficult to adapt to all these dislocations, though he enlarged his poetry and literature readings and left behind the religious fervour of his earlier years. In the Reggio Emilia High School, he met his first true friend, Luciano Serra. Now, the two met again in Bologna, where Pasolini spent 7 years completing high school. Here, he cultivated new passions, including football, and his other friends, of course, Hermes Parini, Franco Farofle, and Elio Meli supported him. With them, he formed a group dedicated to literary discussions, and in 1939, Pasolini graduated and entered the Literature College of the University of Bologna. He discovered new themes there, such as philology and aesthetics of figurative arts. And he also frequented the local cinema club. Could be that's where his passion for film began. Pasolini always showed his friends a virile and strong exterior, totally hiding his interior turmoil underneath. In 1942, Pasolini published at his own expense a collection of his poems, Versi a Cassarsa, which he had written at the age of 18. The work was noted and appreciated by such intellectuals at the time as Gianfranco Contini, Alfonso Gatto, and Antonio Russi. Pasolini's family took shelter in Cassarsa, considered a more tranquil place to wait for the conclusion of the Second World War. Pasolini tried to distance himself from these horrific events, and on the 12th of February 1945, sadly, his brother Guido was killed in an ambush planted by Italian Garibaldini partisans. Now, this devastated Pasolini and his mother. In 1950, Pasolini moved to Rome with his mother Susanna to start a new life, and he was acquitted of 2 indecency charges in 1950 and 1952. Pasolini found a job working in the Cinecittà film studios, and he sold his books in the Bancarelli of Rome. And in 1951, with the help of the Abruzzese language poet Vittorio Clemente, he found a job as a secondary school teacher in Ciampino, just outside the capital. In 1957, together with Sergio Sitti, Pasolini collaborated on Federico Fellini's film Nights of Calabria, writing the dialogue for the Roman dialect sections. And Fellini also asked him to work on dialogue for some episodes of La Dolce Vita as well. Pasolini made his debut as an actor in Il Gobbo in 1960 and co-wrote Long Night in 1943, along with Ragazzi di Vita, where he had his celebrated poem Le Cenere di Gramsci published. Now, the first of Pasolini's highly acclaimed films, and the winner of numerous film festival prizes, Accattone, uses a talented cast to present a vivid picture of the Roman slums. Based on one of the filmmaker's poet's novels, this story of a pimp, his friends, his enemies, and his girls is realism at its earthiness. It is brutal, realistic, and unsentimental, and bustling with life. Particularly effective is the use of Johann Sebastian Bach on the soundtrack, which provides the ironic counterpoint of the world of prostitutes and street fighters. Vittorio, nicknamed Accattone, leads a mostly serene life as a pimp in the outskirts of the city of Rome, until his prostitute, Maddalena, is hurt by a rivaling gang and sent to prison for false testimony. Finding himself without either a steady income or much inclination for working himself, he first tries to reconcile with the estranged mother of his child, but he is driven away by her relatives. Now, Franco Sitti was nominated for the BAFTA Award for Best Foreign Actor in 1963 for his performance, and the film premiered at the Venice Film Festival. Now, the release has a running time of 117 minutes and is in a 1:37:1 aspect ratio. The second disc in the set, starring Anna Magnani, is Mama Roma, a middle-aged prostitute who attempts to extricate herself from her sordid past for the sake of her son. Highlighting director Pasolini's lifelong fascination with the marginalised and dispossessed, Mama Roma offers an unflinching, neo-realistic look at the struggle for survival in post-war Italy. Now, initially banned in the country for obscenity, today the film remains a classic. Pasolini based his screenplay for Mama Roma on the true case of Marcello Elisei, who had died in prison. Shooting for the film began on the 9th of April 1962 with a cast that largely consisted of non-professionals. Unhappy with Magnani's interpretation of the title role, he expanded Citi's role of Carmine, but the production was temporarily halted when Citi was arrested for petty crime. On the 31st of August 1962, Mama Roma premiered at the Venice Film Festival, and on the same day, a police complaint was filed claiming that the film was offensive to good morals and contrary to public decency for the language used. But the complaint was turned down by a magistrate 5 days later. But on the night of the film's release in the Quattro Fontane cinema in Rome, that was on the 22nd of September 1962, Pasolini was confronted with protesting neo-fascists and got involved in a scuffle. Mama Roma also met with a lot of criticism from the left, and its domestic box office was only a humble 168 million lira. And you could say that this was the start of the controversy that would often surround some of Pasolini's later works. Mama Roma has a running time of 106 minutes in the set, and it's a widescreen presentation, no black bars. Next we have, from 1964, Love Meetings. This is a radically engaging documentary. Now, Pasolini takes to the streets in this documentary, town squares, beaches, factories and universities of 1960s Italy to solicit everyday citizens' thoughts on a host of hot-button subjects, including sex work, gender equality, homosexuality and divorce, then of course illegal in Italy. And what emerges is both a kaleidoscope cross-section of faces and places, from the industrialised cities of the north to the rural villages of the south, and an incisive portrait of a society where, despite the rapid modernisation brought on by post-war economic miracle, hypocrisy, repression and conformism still held sway. Now, typical for him, Pasolini's subject is sex. He questions representatives from a variety of social brackets on topics such as virginity, prostitution, homosexuality and sex education. The interviews are made in Italy. The overarching themes are sexual ignorance, confusion and conservatism. Now, the film is divided into 4 large parts called Recherche, literally searches, and a brief prologue in which Pasolini asks children in a poor area where babies come from. Their responses include things like flowers, the stork, Jesus and God, and my uncle, and an epilogue in which Pasolini recites one of his poems about marriage. Love Meetings has a running time of 90 minutes, and it's also a widescreen presentation. The birth, life, teachings and death on the cross of Jesus Christ, presented almost as cinema verite. This feature film seemed a strange choice for such a revolutionary director, but it's an attempt to take Christ out of the opulent church and present him as an outcast Italian peasant. Applying neo-realist methods, the director shot in Calabria, using the expressive faces of non-professionals, including that of his mother as the Virgin Mary. The Gospel, according to Matthew, is considered the greatest screen version of the greatest story ever told. And this was freshly remastered, of course, and it brings the film to life in a way that has never been seen before. It was nominated for Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, and Best Music at the 1967 Academy Awards. Pasolini had accepted Pope John XXIII's invitation for a new dialogue, and he subsequently visited the town of Assisi to attend a seminar at a Franciscan monastery there. The papal visit caused traffic jams in the town, leaving Pasolini confined to his hotel room. There, he came across a copy of the New Testament. Pasolini read all 4 Gospels straight through, and he claimed that adapting a film from one of them threw in the shade all the other ideas for work I had in my head. Unlike previous cinematic depictions of Jesus' life, Pasolini's film doesn't embellish the biblical account with any literary or dramatic invention, nor does it present an amalgam of the 4 Gospels. Pasolini employed many of the techniques of Italian neorealism in the making of this film. Most of the actors he hired were again non-professional. Enrique Erazucchi, playing Jesus, was a 19-year-old economics student from Spain and a communist activist, while the rest of the cast were mainly locals from Barile, Matera and Massafra, where the film was shot. Pasolini visited the Holy Land but found the locations unsuitable and commercialised. His location scouting in the Holy Land is documented in the adjoining feature-length documentary Location Hunting in Palestine, which was released a year later. Pasolini cast his own mother Susanna as the elderly mother of Jesus. The cast also included noted intellectuals of the time, such as the writers Enzio Siciliano and Alfonso Gatto, poets Natalia Ginzburg and Rodolfo Wilcock, and philosopher Giorgio Agamben. And in addition to the original biblical source, Pasolini used references to 2,000 years of Christian painting and sculptures throughout the film. It was stunningly shot amid the timeless landscapes of southern Italy and set to a soundtrack that encompasses everything from Bach to black spirituals. The Gospel, according to Matthew, cuts past dogma and straight to the core of Jesus' radical humanism. Now, it's a running time of 137 minutes, and again is a widescreen presentation. The Hawks and the Sparrows from 1966 is a wildly comic fable starring the beloved stone-faced clown Toto as an Italian everyman and Ninetto Davoli as his good-natured but empty-headed son. Now, Pasolini uses a comic crow, which philosophises amusingly and pointingly about the passing scene as a counterpoint to the performers, representing humanity as they progress down the road of life. Now, this tragic fable is a delight that captures the peril of 2 innocents caught in the paradox of Italian life between the church and the state. While wandering the countryside, a pair of father and son vagabonds, played respectively by Italian cinema legend Toto in his final major film role, and Ninetto Davoli, happen upon a talking crow, who spouts philosophy and launches them on a freewheeling picturesque through time, space, and the margins of rapidly modernising Italy. A comic Marxist fable that balances heady ideas about religion, poverty and class struggle with irreverent slapstick sight gags. Now, Pasolini chose to cast Toto as the protagonist as he felt his comedic style represented the 2 aspects of humanity, that's extravagance and humanity. Pasolini chose to use both non-professional actors from off the streets and Italian cinematic icons like Toto, because he felt the brutality of the amateur and the lightness of the professional worked well together. Now, Toto was used to choosing his own jokes and ad-libbing his own lines, but for this film he learned to respect Pasolini's script and, of course, his direction. Now, Carlo Croccolo offered to dub Toto for Pasolini as he worked on the dubbing for many of Toto's other films, but Pasolini refused this. Scenes had to frequently be reshot as the crow kept trying to claw at Toto's eyes. Very painful. Thus, a system was devised where the crow's cage was actually placed behind the camera and the crow would chase after it. Now, the film had great critical success, but the commercial success it had was unfortunately quite weak. This would be the lowest grossing film to star Toto. Despite the lack of box office success, The Hawks and the Sparrows finds Pasolini at his lightest yet. and of course stingingly subversive as ever. The film's a running time of 89 minutes, and again it's a full screen presentation, which now seems to be a preferred choice for Pasolini. Oedipus Rex is a 1967 Italian film directed by Pasolini. It's adapting the screenplay from the Greek tragedy Oedipus Rex, written by Sophocles in 428 BC. The film was mainly shot in Morocco, and it was presented in competition at the 20th Venice International Film Festival. It was Pasolini's first feature-length colour film. Shot amidst the dark elemental landscapes of the Moroccan desert and set in an ancient past, this bold reimagining casts the filmmaker's frequent collaborator Franco Sitti as the eponymous foundling, whose willful blindness to his own nature unleashes a cataclysmic reckoning. A dark and riveting retelling of the classic tragedy Oedipus Rex. Unknown to himself, Oedipus kills his father and marries his mother, and when the truth is discovered, he puts out his eyes, and Oedipus wanders the streets until he is found by his daughter Antigone, a common blind beggar. Set in Morocco, the film is a visual wonder of desert landscapes and powerful Moroccan and Moorish architecture. This cast includes avant-garde film and theatre director Carmelo Bene, Julian Beck from New York's Living Theatre, and Pasolini himself in the film as the High Priest. Now, Pasolini began scouting locations in Romania for Oedipus Rex. He wanted a rugged, stark landscape that would resemble Greece. However, he found them in the midst of an agrarian revolution and was dismayed that he would have to choose a different location. He indeed did, and he settled on Morocco, a land filled with mountains and desert, which bears little resemblance to Greece. The film's style is intentionally ahistorical, and it uses various cultural motifs to create an otherworldly environment. The score for the film is composed heavily of Romanian folk music, taken, indeed, from the Elektra record release entitled Anthology of Romanian Folk Music. Pasolini chose this music for its ambiguous sound and language. Now, the entire second part of the film is faithfully adapted from Sophocles' play, Oedipus Rex. Much of the dialogue's taken straight from Sophocles. The first half depicts the events leading up to the play and is Pasolini's depiction of them with his own poetic style. The beginning and end of the film is in 1920s Italy and is an invention of Pasolini himself. With a prologue and epilogue set in 20th century Italy, Pasolini connects the story to his own upbringing, daring to bare his soul on the screen. Oedipus Rex from 1967 is one of Pasolini's most well-known films and emphasises his strong literary background, being influenced heavily by classic literature during his younger years. It's a running time of 105 minutes, and it's his first full-length colour feature, again in widescreen presentation. Next in the set we have Teorema. Thought by many to be one of his most existential offerings, it was the first time he worked primarily with professional actors. Now, in this film, an upper-class Milanese family is introduced to and then abandoned by a divine force. Themes in the film include the timelessness of divinity and the spiritual corruption of the bourgeoisie. A mysterious figure known only as the Visitor appears in the lives of a typical bourgeois Italian family. His arrival is heralded at the gates of the family's Milanese estate by an arm-flapping postman. The enigmatic stranger soon engages in sexual affairs with all members of the household. The devoutly religious maid, the sensitive son, the sexually repressed mother, the timid daughter, and finally, the tormented father. Now, it stars British actor Terence Stamp in the leading role of the Visitor, with Laura Betti as Emilia, the maid, Silvana Mangano as Lucia, the mother, and Massimo Ghigarotti as Paolo, the father, Anne Wyazemski as Odetta, the daughter, Andre Jose Cruz Sublette as Pietro, the son, and Ninetto Davoli once again as Angelino the postman. On its release, the religious right and the Vatican criticised the sexual content contained in the film. Others considered the film ambiguous and visionary. Of course, it won a special award at the Venice Film Festival from the International Catholic Film Office, only for the award to be withdrawn later when the Vatican protested. Teorema has a running time of 98 minutes and is a full widescreen presentation. I ate human flesh. I quiver with joy. Provocateur Pasolini is at its most incendiary in this double-edged allegory on fascism, consumerism and resistance. Taken together, these stories of transgression form a scathing commentary on post-war European moral rot and the meaning of rebellion in the face of a corrupt world. Now, the film, heavily criticised, is divided into two parts that come together during the plot and want to denounce the power and negative influence that some parents have over their children. For the incipit of each episode, tombstones are taken and read, which speak of the disobedience of children towards their parents and of the tragic and severe consequences. The first episode, A Defiant Man, Pierre Clementi, perpetrates increasingly barbaric acts while wandering a mythic volcanic landscape. In the other, The Scion, that's Jean-Pierre Lelot, of a wealthy ex-Nazi industrial family, contains a shocking proclivity. Now, while we certainly recognise that Pasolini is making some highly political comments in comparing what appears to be ancient medieval systems with the Wirtschaftswunder, and by association indeed with the Third Reich, the very same connections made more brilliantly, of course, by Fassbinder a few years later, particularly in his film A Year of 13 Moons, there is still something fetching and disconnected in his tales. Yes, the young cannibal of The Lover of Pits may be the natural result of their parental desires for vast power and wealth, but Pigsty, that's the English translation, doesn't really reveal that, but merely points to it almost as if it could be self-evident. Nonetheless, released in 1969, Porcile, or Pigsty, is an important film in Pasolini's career, demonstrating his historical sense of horrifying behaviour resulting from the even more terrifying greed of a previous generation, the sins of the father. In this case, they need to be carefully reiterated. Porcile has a running time of 98 minutes, and it's another widescreen presentation, and of course, another colour feature. And we come to the final film in the set, Pasolini 101. It's another reworking of classic, and it's Medea, based on the ancient myth of Medea. Filmed in Gorem open-air museum's early Christian churches, Pisa and the citadel of Aleppo, it stars the opera singer Maria Callas in her only film role. She doesn't sing in this movie, incidentally. The film is largely a faithful portrayal of the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, and the events, of course, of Euripides' play, The Medea, concerning the portrayal of Medea by Jason and his eventual demise at her hands. Now, as a companion piece to his Oedipus Rex, of course, it's far removed from the neo-realistic early movies that he made. Pasolini's Medea draws on Euripides' play after first relating the story of Jason and the Argonauts' voyage to steal the golden fleece from primitive Colchis and bring it back to Greece along with the king's daughter Medea. The second part concerns her terrible revenge when Jason deserts her and their children. This willfully complex film, which had some baffled and infuriated, is a Freudian Marxist Christian take on the myth, buttressed by Pasolini's cranky ideas about capitalism and mysticism versus modernity. Shot on locations as different as the beautiful Campo at Pisa and the Gorem region of Turkey, it's visually astonishing, and at its centre, of course, is Maria Callas, a commanding presence with her large brown eyes. Now, she dubbed herself in the English-speaking version. Jason is played by the Italian Olympic triple jumper Giuseppe Gentile. The film was received positively by critics, but not by the box office. It didn't receive commercial success. Massimo Girotti is Creon. Lawrence Zersef is Chiron, the centaur. Giuseppe Gentile, of course, is Jason. Margarethe Clementi is Glos. Paul Jabara as Peleus. Gerard Weiss is the second centaur. Sergio Tramonti is Asperto, that's Medea's brother. And the film doesn't use the dialogue written by Euripides, but the plot does closely follow the structure of his play. Now, whatever the source of Pasolini's film, we are simply terrified by brutality contained in it, and there seems to be no way out of this horrendous drama of hate and revenge, except, of course, in the earliest of scenes with the centaur and the young Jason, played by Luigi Marceroni, told and encouraged before he can comprehend the message by the centaur to reclaim his kingdom taken from him. Now, though the film was quite beautifully filmed, Pasolini's movie is confusing. It's a mix and match version of the Medea myth, and since it's mostly presented with images and very little dialogue, it's almost impossible to comprehend why Jason, upon his return to Corinth, turns his attentions away from Medea to Glos, and why in the sudden revenge Medea repeats the brutal ceremony we witnessed earlier in the film, this time destroying her brother Abristus, before she turns on her lover and Glos. Medea has a running time of 110 minutes and should be seen not only to appreciate the direction Pasolini was heading in as he came to the end of his 60s era, with the highly controversial and universally hated Salo still to come 6 years later. The set's well presented and comes with an impressive set of features. So we got two shorts made by the director Pier Paolo Pasolini for anthology films La Ricotta, made in 1963, and The Sequence of the Paper Flower in 1969. Two documentaries made by Pasolini during his travels. A new programme on Pasolini's visual style, as told through his personal writing, and that's narrated by the actor Tilda Swinton and the writer Rachel Kushner. Audio commentaries on Accattone and Teorema. Documentaries on Pasolini's life and career featuring archival interviews with the director and his close collaborators. Episode from 1966 of the French television programme Cinéaste de notre temps. Interview with filmmakers and scholars. Trailers, new English subtitle translations, and in the deluxe packaging, of course, we've got a 100-page book featuring an essay and notes on the films by the critic James Quant, and writings and drawings by Pasolini himself. And the cover designed for Pasolini 101 is by regular contributor Eric Skillman. Now, as a coda, Pasolini, of course, was murdered and possibly assassinated on the 2nd of November 1975 on the beach at Ostia. He had been run over several times by his own car. Multiple bones were broken and his testicles were crushed by what appeared to be a metal bar. An autopsy revealed later that his body had been partially burned with gasoline after his death. The crime was long viewed as a mafia-style revenge killing, one extremely unlikely to have been carried out by only one person. Pasolini was buried in Casarsa. But it's certainly undeniable that his 60s period was one of his most productive creatively, and so many filmmakers were undoubtedly influenced by his cinematic style and themes to this day, and will continue to draw on his veritable genius. On the screen now we have a list of all the films and their running times. The set releases on Tuesday the 27th of June, just in time for the US Barnes & Noble sale, and it will be great for collectors to grab this amazing set at half the price. Now, if you want to know more about this great director, check out P.P. Pasolini, directed by Malga Kubiak, a drama based on the story of Pier Paolo Pasolini's life and death, released in 2015. The movie was screened at the 7th edition of the LGBT Film Festival in Warsaw, and it received People's Choice Award at that festival. So, from Pasolini, we move into the month of July. I've got such a lot on offer. So until next month, when I see you again, from me it's goodbye and good viewing.